What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And we are officially in the second half of the season. A lot of people might hear that and think, how are we doing that when we haven't reached the All-Star break? Well, it's simple. 82 games in the season. This was the Cavs' 42nd game. They improved to 36-6 after their victory over the Phoenix Suns, which they won on Monday, 118-92. And it was a game where the Cavs kind of came out and displayed who they were on the defensive end, and it showcased what they are capable of, especially against two of the premier scorers in the NBA, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, especially when you talk about how the Cavs were able to hold Devin Booker just to 15 points over the course of the game. And he still played nearly 32 minutes. So you talk about how the production on that end of the floor was able to showcase itself, even without three of their top defenders. Isaac Okoro was out with a right shoulder AC joint sprain. We know about that and how that sidelined him for 2 weeks earlier this season. Caris LeVert also was out with a wrist injury. I'll get into him a little bit more later on. And then we'll also talk about Evan Mobley, who was out with a calf injury. So a little bit more on those three different injuries. I talked to Kenny Atkinson before the game about this in his pregame presser, and he talked about how Evan Mobley is more of a day-to-day situation because of how the calf injury has been elevated from a soreness to a calf strain. So it's something that we need to monitor when it comes to Evan Mobley, especially with how sensitive the calf area can be and how that can also turn into an Achilles injury if not monitored correctly. So I definitely think that is something to keep an eye on, even if we're talking about how cautious the Cavs have been with him this year and with every injury this season. Isaac Okoro's injury is a little bit more tricky. As I mentioned, we understand that this is the same shoulder that he injured earlier in the season that saw him out for 2 weeks with that AC joint sprain in his right shooting shoulder. And that's something that we definitely want to keep an eye on because he didn't come back at 100%. He wanted to play through it as he does. He's a very tough and very gritty guy. And you notice that he wasn't able to shoot the ball at the same clip that we're used to from Isaac Okoro. He's a guy who came into the season and was shooting numbers off the charts, right? His offensive rating numbers were great. He was shooting some of the best percentages of his career from the three-point line, and it added a different level of depth to the Cavs when it comes to the 3-and-D conversation. And when you talk about Isaac Okoro, and obviously he's a great defender, probably the best Cavs perimeter defender that they have, but in all honesty, the major portion of his game being able to add the shooting aspect, but also being able to be used as a half roller, as a offensive hub in the middle of the court, as a roller to the basket, and then using him in a pick and pop. It allowed the Cavs to do so much more, and his reputation was beginning to change as a shooter because we understood that he wasn't respected after the playoffs and hasn't been respected as a 3-and-D player, just more on the defensive end. And because he was shooting better from the perimeter, that allowed the Cavs to have a different dynamic and different schemes as he was beginning to be respected by opposing defenses who were closing out on him, and then he could attack closeouts and get to the rim and all those different things. So I definitely think with Isaac's injury, it's more important for him to come back fully healthy and feeling comfortable and looking like himself, as Kenny Atkinson mentioned, because even though he might not say it, he definitely didn't come back feeling the same. He was trying to fight through it, and we know him to be that kind of player. But with this kind of injury, with the kind of productivity that he was having to begin the season, you want to see him at his best. And we'll have to wait and see how long that takes for him to get back to that because we know how hard he wants to work to get back on the floor. But then the last injury that we have to talk about is Caris LeVert. I write the preview article about 12 a.m. every morning of the game days, so I have the injury reports for the next day, even if teams play back-to-backs usually, unless even if back-to-backs are a little bit difficult. But nonetheless, Caris LeVert was not on the injury report last night, but he got added to it about 2 hours before game time with a wrist soreness. And obviously an hour later before tip-off, he was not only added, but he was downgraded from questionable to out in that game. So that left Kenny Atkinson trying to figure out what he was going to do on the defensive end, especially against guys like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, without three of their best defenders. Obviously, Evan Mobley being a defensive anchor in the painted area, and then Isaac Okoro and Karis LeVert being perimeter protectors as well. I think it's definitely interesting to think about how Kenny Atkinson utilized the understanding that they didn't have their best defenders, and give credit to George Niang and Dean Wade on their defensive efforts. They were guys that stepped up and guarded Kevin Durant. They were the main assignment for them was KD, but they also, Kenny Atkinson utilized the zone defense that he's become so known for, even dating back to his days in Brooklyn. And Kevin Durant and Mike Budenholzer after the game described the difficulty of going up against that defense, especially when KD described it as not having sets to run against a zone defense.
They do a good job of switching their defense, slowing you down. I mean, it was a tie game coming out the first quarter. He zoned us pretty much in the second quarter, got us off a little bit, and then able to get out and run, turn the ball over from that, missed a few shots, played late to the clock, which is to their advantage. So when you look at the stats and you look at we played pretty good defense on them. But we couldn't score well. They did a good job playing defense on us. They did a good job zoning us up and switching their defenses. They're well coached, play well as a team. And, so I think that small thing threw us off when it was a game, And I think when they played straight up, we got some good shit on them. But they're a good team. They switch defenses. Kenny was with Steve Kerr, so they might go from zone to man and zone that man in one possession. Right, like they just playing with the game, So throwing you off a bit on the offensive side of the ball, Kenny's done a great job with them this year doing that. So I think that was a game, to be honest.
Obviously, Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. He's going to get his buckets. He ended the game with 23 points, shooting 9 of 16 from the field. He just took one three-pointer, so you understand he was getting to the mid-range. And that's a game that Kenny Atkinson and the Cavs are okay with in a league that is becoming more known for the three-point shot. It's understanding that 2, again, is less than 3, and I feel like we have this conversation all the time, but especially in the possessions game that the Cavs were dealing with today, where the Phoenix Suns shot just 77 shots from the floor, and the Cavs were able to account for 95 shots on their end because they were winning the rebounding battle, especially on the offensive boards. They were up 15-1 on the offensive rebounds compared to the Phoenix Suns. And they also were forcing turnovers, especially going back to the defense that they were playing. That's on-ball perimeter defense. Again, give credit to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, but Darius came away with 3 steals of his own of the 17 turnovers that they forced of the Phoenix Suns. It was definitely a great day for the defensive unit, and Kenny Atkinson marked it as one of their best showcases on that end of the floor in nearly a month. Obviously, this is now becoming an offensive-minded team, so for them to have this showcase, again, against 2 of the best scorers in the league, and Kevin Durant, probably one of the best pure scorers in NBA history, it's a testament to what they're capable of and the standard that they have and they should set for this team on the defensive end. The other 2 things that we have to talk about, the other 2 players that we have to talk about that made unsung hero type efforts tonight or today as an afternoon game. I got some subtext about that, me saying tonight a couple times for a 3:30 start. That's just habit, folks. I apologize. But when you talk about 2 guys that regularly don't get a lot of minutes, in Tristan Thompson and Jaylen Tyson. Tristan Thompson had the most minutes of his season tonight, 26 in tonight's win over the Phoenix Suns, and that started in the first quarter. They tried to help out Jarrett Allen, who was battling on the interior by himself without Evan Mobley. Obviously, you have Dean Wade, but the task is a lot harder without Evan Mobley being the 7-footer, the length that he has, and being able to rely on each other, something that we've known Jarrett to talk about in the past. So I definitely think give credit to Jared Allen, but also give credit to Tristan Thompson, because when Dean Wade and Jared Allen were on the bench, they went to Tristan Thompson to anchor the painted area. And sure, we can talk about how the offense took a major hint with that, because obviously Tristan isn't the offensive specialist that he once was or ever was, to be very fair. Like, you talk about how Dean Wade spaces the floor out for the Cavs and allows them to get open looks and has a gravity to him. But then you also talk about Jared Allen being an offensive hub, someone that they go to pet sets, pick and roll, start offensive, start schemes, start actions. Like, Jared Allen does a lot more than I think people recognize on the offensive end, because everybody turns to his defensive effort and how great he's been on that side of the ball. So, yeah, give credit to Tristan Thompson for being able to play 26 minutes. I believe Kenny Atkinson said that he played 18 minutes straight. So for any NBA player, that's a long stretch. And for someone who was getting up there as one of the older players in the NBA, that's definitely something you want to keep an eye on for Tristan Thompson, and how he's capable of not only helping out when Jared Allen or Evan Mobley need a blow, but also still contributing in that aspect. He had 10 rebounds. I think he had just 2 points on the night. He had 1 point on the night and 10 rebounds. So that's basically what you can expect from Tristan Thompson. You can get him on the boards. You can see him fighting. You can see him setting tough screens. But when you talk about a guy that you lean on for offensive help, that's not the one that you want to go to. And we obviously understood that this was a schematic adjustment that Kenny Atkinson had to make. And Chris likes to call him a problem solver. The Cavs like to call him a problem solver. I asked Donovan Mitchell after his interview today about what he would describe him as for Kenny Atkinson and how he adjusts to things on the fly. And he says that he puts fires out before they can even get to that point, before they can even get started. And I think that's a great assessment of how he's been able to grow this offensive approach for the Cavs, but also understanding that it takes the entire rotation, the entire roster. And that's something that Kenny went into also, about how this win showed how they are able to go 10, 11, 12 men deep in the rotation, because everybody is able to contribute, even if it's in their own little way. Tristan Thompson being an example of being a defensive person rather than an offensive mind. Dean Wade is also in that category if you want to go into that way. But I also wanted to touch on Jaylen Tyson, someone who has gotten few minutes this year, but he's also come through when it comes to when he started earlier in the season alongside the rest of the starters. And then tonight, you got to see Jaylon get to play some minutes with the actual rotation. And I think he showcased that when he's around veteran players, when he's around guys where he doesn't feel like he has to shoulder as much of the load, obviously with he's on the floor in garbage minutes with Tristan and Craig Porter Jr. and Amani Bates, who got minutes for the first time in the NBA this season tonight. Those are the guys where he feels Jaylen Tyson might feel like he has to do more, and that takes away from what he's good at and what he's proven to be an asset for this team, which is defense, 3-and-D, and rebounding. And rebounding has been a key for Jaylen Tyson because, as Kenny Atkinson says, he was great at rebounding in college, and that's one of the things that translates the best from college to the NBA is their prowess at rebounding and being able to read things off the rim and get after different things. It's definitely an interesting concept for seeing Jaylon being in two different roles and how he was kind of the head of the snake, or not kind of, he was the head of the snake when he was at Cal just last year. So it's definitely interesting when you talk about how he's developed, how he is developing with this team as the number 20 overall pick and having different expectations on a team that wants to make it past the Eastern Conference semifinals. And I definitely think that's something you have to keep an eye on when it comes to Jaylon. And
I couldn't be more happy for him because you see the amount of work and time that he puts into his craft and his game, and to ask a young kid, 42 games into it, to be like, hey, you might get an opportunity in 5 or 6 or 7 out of those 42 games, and to be prepared like he was to go in there and make an impact, to help us win, to make big shots. I mean, you can't just teach that stuff. That's who he is as a person. And I think that's just how life works, right? You know, you're process-based, right? And he hasn't really strayed away from his process of getting in the gym, doing his reps down in the G League, practicing with us, you know, getting in at the end of games. You know, him and Damari Carroll do a great job of, you know, working together. And, you know, you never know when your moment is going to come, but how fitting is it, you know, for when guys are out that not only does he impact us defensively, but he gets rewarded with, you know, making 2 threes, where I've seen him work countless hours running to those spots to get those. So it's there's no instant gratification in your process. So I'm glad that during this journey and in his process, he got to have some gratification that, you know, the stuff that he's doing is paying off.
All these trade talks that are going on, but I definitely think that tonight showcased how valuable he could be to the Cavs in multiple different ways. So read into that however you may want to. But the last couple of things that I want to get into, and I will be adding in more audio for this version of the podcast so you guys can get a better insight behind the scenes as the conversations that we were having pregame, postgame, all those different things. When you talk about the relationships that have been developed this year, especially under Kenny Atkinson, Donovan Mitchell is one of them. And we've understood that he's taking a step back for this team, for the betterment of this team, to continue to foster the growth of the players around him. But Donovan has shown 3 of the last 4 games that he's played, he's had 30 points, right? So there's an obvious indication that maybe OKC, who has Lou Dort and is one of the best defenders in the entire NBA, is a nemesis of Donovan Mitchell, and the rest of the league is going to pay for it when he's not playing against those kinds of defenders, right? Because he's going to attack. And the interesting part about Donovan is when talking to him after the game, he said that he wasn't even satisfied or happy with his performance based on efficiency, because it's more so about the amount of shots, the difficulty of the shots that he's taken, because that also means that he's taking shots away from his teammates who could be in a better situation to score a better opportunity. So even if he's making them, Donovan in the back of his mind is trying to calculate where he can improve his game efficiently to help them win more games and win down the stretch and have everybody around him just prepared to go at any level against any defense. And tonight was one of those nights where he had 33 points, but he even mentioned that sometimes when he's critical of himself, even his mom gets upset with him because of how he performs and how he's uplifting everybody as he goes. And that's what Donovan is continuing to learn about himself and how he can make adjustments on the fly, but also giving him grace at the same time, because we understand that as a star of the league, you have or feel the obligation to carry a team when they're not having the offensive productivity that they are. Or if you feel like you just have it on one night, you just got to keep going with what you have. So I definitely think Donovan has kind of the double-edged sword when it comes to critiquing himself because of how good he is, what he sees himself as in the league, and also understanding that there have been games over the last 2 weeks where he hasn't scored 15 points or more. So he wants to not only show or prove to himself, even maybe subconsciously, that he's still got it in him, but understanding that and showing to the league and even maybe more so to the fans and the All-Star voters, as today was the last day to vote for the All-Star game, that he not only deserves to be in that conversation, but even in MVP conversations.
You know, for me, I'm always going to push myself to be great. You know, anybody you could look at this night and be like, okay, you know, yeah, I did, you know, I had a pretty good game. No, like, you know, my goal is to be as efficient as possible. You know, take better shots, you know, different things. I'm always going to be critical of myself, you know that, more so than anybody else, you know, but that's just always been my role. You know, I don't have an exact number to be like, oh yeah, it's this, but like understanding that tonight, you know, it was a good night, but I can be much better, you know, and just continue to push myself. That's how I've gotten to be where I am. That's how I am for this group. And like I said, it's not always going to be, you know, 30. Some nights it is, some nights it's not. Some nights it may be 40, 50, whatever it may be, but continue to be efficient in all aspects. And tonight I feel like offensively I took some tough ones that, you know, took away from other guys. I got to be better. I mean, the shots I took weren't the greatest tonight, or the decisions I should make. Not necessarily shots, but the decisions, you know, just being better. And, you know, y'all may look too deep into this, but I'm always, a stickler for that. This is probably the first time I really say it as much as I am out loud, but that's just how I've always been, especially now, continuing to take that step and be that guy. I want to continue to, better myself. And nights like tonight, you could point to a lot of positives. No one really likes my mom. Damn, she doesn't like when I talk about all the negatives, but that's just who I am. That's just how I continue to be. But that's just, like I said, for this group, I'm going to continue to find ways to be better.
We also talked a little bit about Darius Garland and Jarrett Allen, the other two of the three of the core four that were available tonight. And Jarrett Allen had another double-double, his 23rd double-double of the season. He was 12 points and 11 rebounds, and he shot 5 of 6 from the field. So, again, the low maintenance of Jarrett Allen has allowed him to be so great for this team. He's able to do exactly what the team needs on any given night. And what we talk about so much for this team is the possessions battle. And we talked about the 15-to-1 ratio of the offensive rebounds for the Cavs. Jarrett Allen had 5 of the 15 rebounds on the offensive glass for the Cavs. So that just a testament to his grit, his work ethic on that end of the floor, especially going up against Nick Richards for the Suns, who just got traded from the Charlotte Hornets to them. It was only his second game with the Phoenix Suns. So understanding that he might not know where everybody on the court is going to be, and Jarrett taking advantage of that and powering through and all those different things is definitely notable of what he was able to do tonight. And then Darius Garland, and I know people are going to say, oh, he didn't have 20 points. Oh, he shot 6 of 13 from the field. It's still 46.2%. He was 3 of 5 from 3, 60%. The biggest thing for him, I think, is the going 50% from the free throw line, because it changes a little bit how he is looked at for the 50-40-90 conversation, which I know we've talked about in the past and how he's going for that. But when it comes to Darius, he's another guy that's understanding the moment and what things are calling for, because there was a quarter there he had 5 of his 7 assists in just that quarter alone. I believe it was the third quarter coming out and sparking that and allowing the Cavs players around him, the starting unit that played all of the first 6 minutes, to get out and running. I think he's the only player that didn't score in that first 6 minutes, and everybody else around him had at least 4 points because he was facilitating that. Yeah, he had 5 assists in that first 6 minutes of third quarter. And the third quarter, we understand, is one of those very key points for the Cavs. They outscored the Suns 34-24 in the third period, and that's coming off a second quarter where the Cavs only allowed 19 points. And obviously, again, that's talking about that lineup with Sam Merrill, Ty Jerome, Tristan Thompson, Donovan Mitchell, and George Niang that were able to put together a great defensive front, even when utilizing the zone. And Sam Merrill is someone that is not highly respected as a defender, but I feel like he showcased himself tonight especially, and he has all season, to be honest. He's one of the best defensive rated players on the Cavs. And him at the point of attack, being feisty and being competitive, because that's one of the best qualities, and competitiveness is something that you can't take away from Sam Merrill, because that's what he is and how he likes to get after it, especially in a season where he hasn't gotten a lot of minutes, whether it's been injuries or whether it's been everybody's been healthy, so he's been at the bottom of the rotation. So showcasing himself tonight was very critical for him, I believe, and something that we can look forward to, especially with the Cavs being without Karis LeVert, Evan Mobley, and Isaac Okoro for whoever knows how long, especially with Evan Mobley being day-to-day, as Kenny Atkinson mentioned it. Sam Merrill played 22 minutes tonight, so that's a lot more than he's used to. He had 10 points and was 2 of 6 from 3 and got to the free throw line. And he also had 2 steals. So I definitely think when we talk about the defensive prowess of Sam Merrill, that's got to be an area where he gets more respect. And then Ty Jerome, obviously being a maestro on the offensive end as a passer, but also getting into the lane and creating opportunities for himself and others. But I also think he's a guy that is more known for his pickpocketing. So at the point of attack, it's different when you look at what Ty is able to do when he's out pressuring, because sometimes the offensive players on the other team can get by him, and that's where Ty Jerome struggles on the defensive end. But when he's able to get out in front of his defender, he has a good chance of getting a hand in there because he's so quick and twitchy and has the ability to read a point guard as he has been one his entire career. So understanding how to get his hand in, how to place where the ball might be going, what move the point guard might be going to helps him. But there's also flaws in his defensive game that I don't think we can just ignore either way. And I've gotten to a lot of the different players today, but I think the one that I haven't touched on that I feel like needs a little bit more time to still get back into his system is Max Strus. We understand he had a stretch of 2 back-to-back threes, I believe it was. He almost had 3. But Max is a guy that is, again, a competitor, someone that likes to get after it, likes to keep going, and likes to fight for his own. But I wanted to touch on a couple things behind the scenes because we obviously want to give you guys that before we get into anything else about what's coming on the schedule. Obviously, the Cavs are traveling to Houston, and the Houston airport is closed on Tuesday. So the Cavs literally had to finish the game against the Phoenix Suns this afternoon and had to be out of the locker room by 7:30 to be on a flight because the Houston airport closes at midnight and is not reopening for the remainder of the game. So Chris is going to have a little bit of a tough time getting over there because of when the timing of the game is on Wednesday and all those different things. So they will be getting there. Hopefully we have to pray that they get there safely, all those other things, as well as Chris Fedor, who I hope is still going to be able to get a flight, but I know his first flight got canceled because I believe it was for Tuesday. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But obviously the grueling schedule of being able to get on planes, get off planes. I mean, it was a 1-game homestand before getting after a 3-game road trip and then going back on the road for, I believe it's 2 games. So it's just a lot going on for Cleveland. And there's this understanding that they're to get to where they are, 36-6 after 42 games, the expectation is not for them to do the same thing as what they did in the opening half of the season. But, I mean, they win 13 more games and they've already beaten the opening prop of what some betting sites thought they were going to have at 48.5 wins on the season. So I definitely think they understand where they're at in the standings. They understand where they're at health-wise, and they want to get fully healthy and fully ready heading into the playoffs. And obviously we keep talking about that as if it's not only halfway into the season, but we saw how fast the first half went. We having the conversations now, especially heading into the trade deadline, how the roster and the depth have been so vital for this team. And obviously that's another reason why I understand that the Cavs may have what it takes to get Cam Johnson. But when it comes to what they're doing currently with the roster that they constructed and understanding that more than likely Jaylen Tyson will have to be included in the trade deal and 2nd-round picks or their 2031 first-round pick, that's sacrificing a lot of their future for only a chance at right now, especially when you talk about where the Cavs are in the luxury tax, where they're going to be, if I believe his Cam Johnson's contract counts as $27 million going into next year. So there's a lot of money numbers wise, and you would have to obviously more than likely give up not just Jaylen Tyson, but another roster player that you believe that the Brooklyn Nets believe is valuable enough for their rebuild, or they could utilize in a trade themselves. And obviously we can get nerdy and break it down into 3-team, 4-team trades, but I just think where this Cavs team is at, you look back to the Indiana Pacers game where they displayed their depth and how every player was utilized in a different way. And obviously them not having Ty Jerome in that first 2 games against Indiana was telling, and they had to adjust and make different adjustments. And like I said, Kenny Atkinson has been called a problem solver by many, and Donovan said he puts out fires before they can even get started. So it's just really interesting in the time that we're at and where the Cavs are in the season. Obviously, I believe the Celtics won today, so they are still 6.5 games behind them for second in the Eastern Conference. And they are, the Cavs, to say the least, are ahead of schedule, right? They are able to put this knowledge and put these topics to use, understanding where they are and where they can be by the end of the season. But it's not necessarily chasing wins. It's understanding those different things and trying to have your best foot going forward into the playoffs, whether that's resting guys, whether that's keeping Isaac Okoro out a little bit longer than he would like so that he's ready to defend guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum come the playoff time. Or if you want to look at Damian Lillard with the Milwaukee Bucks and Tyrese Maxey with Philadelphia 76ers. All these different teams have guys that Isaac Okoro will need to guard. Evan Mobley is crucial to this team. Donovan Mitchell talked about it after the game. They understand where they are with Evan on the floor, but now they have a better understanding of how they're able to operate without him and still have success. So that's something that could be telling for the future and how they might hold him out to get him healthy and 100% before trying to have him come back. But we understand as well that Evan Mobley is a fast healer and always has been in his entire basketball career. So these are all things just to keep in mind and to monitor going into the second half of the season. But the Cavs are 1-0 in that second half of the season to start. They're heading to Houston now, and they're 36-6, top of the Eastern Conference, best record in the NBA. So they're on good track. And as I mentioned, 13 games to win, to not only match, but to beat their original prop for the season from a lot of different betting sites. So they're in good hands, good standing, and we can only wait to see what's going to happen next. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember, to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your weekly questions for Hey Chris episodes. We're going to do one this week. We're going to have to see where Chris is at. You can ask all those different questions in this week's episode. But to do so, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.